There is no person who does not feel proud and happy when he turns the pages of his country's history and reaches the Achaemenid period, the golden age that advances thanks to kings like Cyrus and Darius, along with progress and civilization in the military fields of the country. The dynasty is distinguished from the rest by the special and magnificent guard, which the enemies call the immortals. But what was the origin of the history of this special army? Who did they fight against, and how is it that their numbers never decrease? If you are interested in knowing the answers to these questions, then you have come to the right place. I invite you to accompany us in another historical adventure and journey to ancient Iran until the end. The Immortal Guard is the name given by the famous Greek historian Herodotus to the elite battalion of 10,000 infantrymen of the Achaemenid army, whose members are unlike ordinary soldiers after the war. They did not return to their wives and children, and instead of working in the fields and markets, they were always on full alert in a series of special barracks. Achaemenians are considered warriors whose main duty was to protect the life of the Shah as a member of the army, the important mission of breaking the line and disrupting the enemy's defense lines. Let's get to know each other. It is interesting to know that this army of 10,000 people is never too many. It could not be done, and in case of illness, injury, or even death of one of the members, they were immediately replaced from the reserves, which were elite and efficient forces, so that the image of their resonance wool would be created in the enemy's mind, as if his side had returned from death. Foreigners and especially the Greeks, out of fear of them, put the name Immortal, which means immortal, on this guard in the famous American Weekly Times. This guard was able to claim the second rank among the special forces of the world's army. With a journey into the heart of history, we understand that the ancient Iranian army and the Achaemenid era had many soldiers of different ethnicities in their forces, but in the meantime, the soldiers of the Immortal Guard were only selected from among the authentic Iranians living in the territory, and with their colored clothes that armor they wore their protection, the important task of protecting the royal family, headed by the queen and the king. For this reason, in terms of intelligence, it was necessary to act quickly so that the members of this guard are always selected from among the best soldiers. Similarly, the commander-in-chief of the Immortal Guard also has the commander-in-chief of the Iranian army. This also showed the high power and influence of this person in the Iranian society. That is why he personally chose this commander from among his families and close and trusted friends. He was in charge of this organization of the Eternal Guard of the rank of Dar, and various officers were formed. Most of them were heavy infantry, however, among them there were a series of special cavalry regiments of 1,000 people. These groups of 1,000 people were divided into 10 groups of 100 people each. During the war, this group was stationed in front of the king's chariot. Among their most important battles, we can mention the attack of King Xerxes on Greece. More generally, if we want to examine the story, Darius the Great formed a special force known as the Persian Immortals to protect the vast empire of Persia. Know that this great movement of Darius took place in the year 465 BC, exactly at the time when many countries still did not have their own army, and even if they had units, they were much smaller and did not have the necessary military discipline. Historians said that the soldiers of the Immortal Corps were selected from tall, strong and good-looking youths. During 6 months of training, these soldiers learned combat techniques and how to work with all kinds of weapons, as well as the ability to tame wild horses and fight against large lions. Another one of their unique exercises was that they cultivated their moral qualities in order to always be able to fight bravely in war and maintain their Iranian authenticity. The countries subject to Iran, as well as creating border fortresses. In addition, Darius the Great, in addition to implementing a series of reforms in state affairs, greatly strengthened the situation of Iran's army and military forces. Among the most important generals and great commanders in history, we can mention Zoper, who played an extremely important role in suppressing the rebellion of Babylon and also in the reconquest of this city. Behind their king, Aston, and of course, he always saw the color image of the Eternal Army on the tiles of Susa Palace. About their appearance, let me tell you that they wore pleated achaemenid clothes, their shoes were of the Iranian three-strap type, and they had a band on their heads, which looked similar to it was the band of the Elamites, and it was not necessary to tie them at all. After the weapons, they carried various weapons with them, among the most important of which we can mention the Segris axe to split the enemy's armor, as well as other weapons such as spears, swords, slingshots, and shields. Now the interesting thing is that they carried their weapons with them in the battlefield. Their only weakness was that the length of their swords was a little shorter than usual, and this issue became a problem for them in a series of wars, and since agility is considered an important point for this guard, the armor in them was relatively thin and light so that they could travel long distances and find out about their enemies, which of course did not happen in this case. Between Iran and Greece, it will be expensive for them, and they will have a bit of a problem against the Spartans, the savages of Greece, whose armor is mostly thick and bronze. The city of Shush is said to have tied their hair with a series of green-dyed ribbons. Of course, there is also an interesting opinion about the uniform of the Eternal Guard. For example, these people wear felt hats in a series of reliefs of Persepolis. The rectangular shape of their shoes, of the three-pointed simple leather type, which their soldiers used a series of special heels to make them taller. It is necessary to know that the Immortal Guard was revived during the Sassanid kingdom, with the difference that the main body of their corps, unlike the achaemenid, which was mostly the infantry, consisted of a large number of heavy cavalry and weapons. In terms of numbers, they are equal to the original 10,000 people and the Achaemenid dynasty. Regarding whether the immortals really wore masks in the Achaemenid era or not, there is a lot of disagreement, but one thing is certain. The Immortal Guard of the Sasanian era undoubtedly used masks in their battles. The reason is that in the writings of that time, they were so armed and armored that the only vulnerable point in their body was their eye holes, which were not protected from the most famous works of the era. Today, regarding Immortal Guard, we can play 2 movies, Occupy 300, as well as DLC. Assassin's Creed pointed out.